So my name's Ryan. I'm from a company called Big Inja Farming. You know what Inja means? Hey? Inja, dog, yeah. Normally they ask the white oak, do you know what Inja means, you know? Yeah. But I do, because that's the company. You can see there, Big Inja. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about regenerative agriculture. Okay, so that's a difference between agriculture as we generally know it. Alright, so the way we produce food now, you see all of these big fields of corn or soybeans, just one field, one crop, right? All of our mealie meal, all of our maize comes from these big crops. Okay, that's really how we've been making food since World War II. We started making food in these big fields of one crop. Okay, but if you've seen how nature works, there's never one crop, right? There's always a mix of things. That's how nature works. So we've actually been farming against nature, not with nature, since World War II. And now we're starting to see the negative impacts of that. So regenerative agriculture is looking to change the way that we produce food and actually take us back to the way we always used to produce food before World War II. And you'll see, it's exactly what everyone understands. It's innate, it's in you. You know how your grandfathers used to eat and produce food. And we're going back to those ways because it's more sustainable. So really that's what I'm going to be talking about today, okay? I'm going to hand these out in a little bit so you guys can each take one of these home. So anything that I cover here today will be in here. So you don't have to worry if you don't get something or whatever. You always have this to refer to. Okay, I'll hand them out now. So basically, okay, first thing, let me ask you something. Do you guys think that we are smarter than nature as humans? Do you think we've evolved to a place where we understand the world better than Mother Nature? By nature, I mean, you know, we look at the trees and the air and the water and the way that it all works together, the rain and the weather and everything else. And it works in a certain way. Do you think we know better than nature? Just generally? No, you don't believe that. Okay. Then the next question is, if you don't mind me asking, ladies, you don't have to give away your age. How old is everyone in the room? How old are you guys?
49 to 50.
49 to 50, roughly speaking. Yeah, I'm also like 38 to 45, somewhere there. How old are you? 30? 31. Oh, you didn't have to answer. 50, okay. So we know a lot of us have been around and remember a time where things were very different. Things have accelerated. We've got to a place now where things are moving very fast, hey? But it wasn't always like that. And interestingly, I think people are now seeing that we can live a different way. We can go back to old ways, use technology, and combine those in a way that makes better sense, right? So I want to start by talking a little bit about, you've heard about global warming and climate change, hey? You've heard about these problems that are global, right? Yes. We've got many things happening. We're having more floods, more droughts, more natural disasters, and I believe the next war we're all going to fight over is clean water. So we're not looking after our water resources, okay? So, and agriculture, the way we produce food, has a big part to play in why we're in this situation. And it's not sustainable, and we're much closer to a tipping point where it's going to be bad for everyone. Even if you've got lots of money, you're not going to be able to hide. There won't be food for you. There won't be an environment for you to live in. And people aren't talking enough about this. It's quite serious. So, where does your oxygen come from? The oxygen you breathe every day. Trees. So, what would you say is the most important natural resource we have on this planet that allows us to breathe clean air? Plants and trees. So something like maybe the Amazon rainforest, you hear about them cutting that down the whole time, hey? And this is the reason, because it gives us oxygen. But did you know that 50% of the oxygen in the air that we breathe comes from something called phytoplankton? And phytoplankton lives in the sea. And what we've been doing while we've been releasing carbon into the atmosphere, which is causing climate change, it's warming our atmosphere. We do that by cutting down trees. Then that tree stores carbon, now it releases it into the atmosphere. We do that by driving cars. So we're taking oil and petrol from the earth, and then we drive and it releases it into the atmosphere. So we're putting carbon up into the atmosphere. How nature works is it pulls carbon out of the atmosphere into the ground. So carbon is a good thing, but it should be in the ground. Okay? But what we're doing with agriculture and industrialization is we're releasing all this carbon into the atmosphere. And what's happening is it's going up into the atmosphere, and the way that the earth fixes that problem is it sucks it down into the sea. The sea is like the earth's lungs. So it pulls it down into the sea. And the problem with that is that it's caused the sea to become more acidic. So, like acid is not a good thing in extreme, right? So the sea has become, over the last 100 years, it's become 30% more acidic. And it's killing the phytoplankton. So that means, as this phytoplankton dies, the problem is not that we're killing the fish, that is a problem. But the problem is not that we're mowing down the rainforests, that is a problem. But the biggest problem that no one's talking about is that the thing that gives us oxygen is being killed. So everyone's arguing, climate change not real, and this. The reality is, if we don't fix this, no one on this planet, like I said, even with lots of money, is going to be able to survive. So we have real challenges here in our midst. Okay, so what we're proposing is that we still need to produce food. So how can we do that while pulling carbon out of the atmosphere instead of releasing it? So that's what this type of farming is trying to do. That's the basics of it. So instead of thinking of ourselves as a chicken farmer or a vegetable farmer, we should be thinking of ourselves as soil farmers. The more we look after the soil, the more carbon we can take out the atmosphere, the more we can breathe. It's like simple. Okay, so that's why we're doing this. Okay, so I'm just going to flip here. Let me hand these out so that you guys have got these. Each take one, please. So we did page 1. There's page 2. Okay. If you've got any questions, please shout. All right. Okay, so between the way we produce food in what I would call the industrial way of producing food, okay, we've done since World War II. I'll go into that a bit later, how we actually produce food and why it's not good. That way of producing food plus transportation equals 42% of that carbon that's in the atmosphere is from agriculture, essentially. And agriculture and moving that food all over the world. You know that the apple you eat might have come from Spain, or the apples we produce go to Europe. I mean, doesn't it sound crazy? Like, we've got apples here, why aren't we eating our own apples? Instead, we're shipping them overseas. This whole system is a little bit crazy. And because of all that movement, we're using even more carbon to transport them on the ships, on the boats, on the lorries. So that's releasing even more carbon into the atmosphere. Okay, so that's why we're proposing we need to start producing food locally and eating locally in what we call a regenerative way. Regeneration means building up, build soil instead of taking soil away. Okay, so go to the next page. Okay, so if we produce more good soil and we are able to increase that good soil by just 2% globally, we will fix the problem. We will pull the carbon out of the atmosphere. So it is possible. We can fix this problem. Okay, so what we're proposing is biological farming over chemical farming. Okay, so biology, use the animals for their intended purpose. Use the animals and their services to help us farm. Okay, chemical farming is like the way they produce corn. And why I say chemical is that they pour pesticides and things on there to kill the weeds and to kill the pests. But it's chemicals, right? And we are consuming those chemicals when we eat that food. So there's also a health discussion here around the food that we're eating is actually killing us. Do you guys know anyone that's sick and you don't know why? Like maybe cancer, maybe things that are hard to understand. Do you know anyone in your communities? Friends, family?
There's a whole lot of people that sick.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure, shoot, please.
When you go biological farming, how do you control those pesticides?
Okay, so with all kinds of farming, you've got natural pests, you've got your bugs, locusts, you've got weeds that are coming up, and you have to de-weed. The way we do that over time is to create healthier soil, because in healthy soil, strong plants grow. Strong plants will not have pests. They'll be able to defend themselves against pests. And then the other way is by biodiversity. Like I was saying, we've got one crop. Think for a pest. It's the easiest thing ever. If I'm a pest that likes corn, I just fly into that field. There's nothing to stop me. I've just got fields of corn. But where there's biodiversity, let's say I've got an apple farm. But instead of just having apples, I go apple, pear, grape, and I mix it up. I have diversity, right? We all know what diversity means, difference, right? But we celebrate difference, we should. And so there's a bug that knows how to eat a pear. So it finds the first pear, but now the next pear tree is 4 trees away. It can't jump to that tree. It has to go over an apple tree and then a pear, another tree to get there. So then maybe you have a small pest problem, but it doesn't become a big problem. And then part of this farming, you have to accept we're part of nature. So some of that produce goes to nature, goes to those animals. And we work in what we call a symbiotic way with nature. And I promise you, if you let nature do the work for you, it becomes easy. Instead of always fighting against nature, saying, I hate weeds. You know that weeds serve a purpose. Do you think nature made up weeds just to anger us and to make farming difficult? So weeds are there to help us fix bad situations. So where there's a disturbance of natural land, you'll see a weed come up. And the reason it's coming up is it's trying to reclaim that land. It doesn't like bare soil. Bare soil means that we're exposing all of our natural resources to the air. We're releasing carbon, we're releasing all the nutrients in that soil that's going to help us grow food. So weeds are coming to try cover that soil so that it can stabilize and that the water can stay in the ground. Okay? So weeds have a purpose. And then what happens is what we call natural succession. So weeds are the first one. Then you'll get what they call a pioneer species. That's like a grass or something that will come in, that's not very nutritious, but it knows how to fix the land. And then after that, once the land starts to recover, then there's seeds everywhere. They're waiting for the right conditions to germinate or to grow. And so what happens is then, as those conditions get better and better seeds germinate. And then you get more nutritious things coming out until eventually that succession has happened and you have healthy soil and healthy plants growing. And then you don't have weeds anymore. The problem with us humans, you've heard of instant gratification. We want it fixed now. So what we're trying to do with this farming is work with nature, but speed up that succession process. So you've seen what the guys are doing there with the beds. What's the first thing they put down? They put down cardboard. And the cardboard stops the weeds coming up. Then we put good soil on top, so we're speeding up the process, stopping the weeds. And then the first thing we plant starts to establish quickly. So we can use smart things to accelerate that process. And some of the things we're doing, like with the chickens, is we're letting the animals do it for us. So instead of bringing in compost and expensive inputs, what comes out of a chicken's bum is free fertilizer. So they're fertilizing for free for us. So we start to work with nature. Instead of putting chickens inside a big house, and then you've got all of their manure concentrated on a concrete floor, it becomes a health problem. We let it go into the land. So this might not be quite as productive as that farm, but I don't have to pay for fertilizer. Or I don't have to, I'm using the services of the animal. So also half of the work I don't have to do myself. So we're trying to work smart and work with nature. So you guys know about profit. Okay? Profit is your income or revenue minus your expenses. Okay? And everyone's always focused, I want more income, more revenue, more income, not realizing that if you reduce your expenses, you can make as much profit. Or it's as good an effort, it's as good a use of your effort as trying to make more money, is reduce your costs. Okay? So this type of farming, we're saying, let's not have any costs. Let nature do the work for us. And our revenue might not be quite as high, but our overall profit is better. So that's also how we're thinking about things. Okay? So the difference between biological farming and chemical farming. Let's jump to the last page, if you don't mind. Any more questions, guys? I don't want to talk too much. It's too hot. Someone else talk. Okay, so on the last page, we're talking about non-GMO feed. Okay? Is it there? Everyone there? Okay. Does anyone know what a GMO is, or what that stands for? It's a genetically modified organism. Okay, so now all of the corn you see, I keep using corn as an example because actually most of our country now, all of the farming is corn. A big part of our country is now covered in corn. You know, it's the most successful plant on the planet. We farm more corn as humans than any other crop. There's out of every other plant alive, corn is the most successful plant, because you could argue it's farming us, because what a successful tactic, it's now everywhere. So corn, in order to farm on one piece of land, like we've been discussing weeds, you're going to have a weed problem, right? Because there's no diversity. So the weeds are going to come up. So what they did in like 1940, after World War II, is that they took some of that war technology, the chemicals from killing people, and they figured out that some of that works very well to grow food. So nitrogen, phosphate, these things that they used as chemicals in the war, you put it on plants, they grow quickly. So they figured that out, okay? And then they figured out that if they use a lot of that, they can grow corn and other crops quickly. But the weeds also grow very quickly, okay? And what they were doing at the time is what they call tilling. They're digging up the land, and so that they're actually exposing the weeds, and the weeds are coming out. So what these guys did is that they said, let's genetically modify the corn seed. So these are not corn seeds from 100 years ago. These are made in a laboratory by scientists. Okay. Now, these seeds, what they promised us with these seeds is that it would have more nutrition, and it would make more per hectare, so that the yield, the amount of food you can make on one piece of land goes up. That was the promise. The reality, after 20 years of farming like that, it wasn't. Because they were farming only one crop, and the GMOs were not working like they thought, the yields were not high, and they had this weed problem. So what they did next, with these other chemicals, they designed pesticides and herbicides, which they spray on the corn crops to get the weeds to go away. And what the genetically modified crops do, so these GMOs, is that they are designed in a laboratory to resist the poison. So herbicide and pesticide is a poison to kill bugs and to kill weeds. So it kills life. Now the GMO corn is designed to resist that. So you can pour this poison all over the corn, it still grows. Okay. The problem with that is now you have poison all over that plant. Plus, that poison is going off into our seas, into our rivers, and then into our seas. And now we have in the sea, we have these big dead zones, no fish. For spaces as big as South Africa, there's no fish, because these rivers are pushing all of this poison off the land that's running off after rainfall, into the rivers, into the sea. And then that's killing our seas as well. So we've got all of these environmental problems from producing. Plus, we've got these health problems. So I believe that a lot of people have got cancers, a lot of people are suffering from obesity, all because of the way we're producing food. Because they can't get all that poison off that corn by the time it makes it to the processing plant, to when it's processed into mealie meal or whatever they're making out of it. And then the other thing is we've now gone and produced so much corn, we actually have too much corn. And so now they're thinking, what can we do with all this corn? And they're making things like corn syrup. And then that corn syrup goes into the drinks you're drinking. And that corn syrup has also got that on it. Plus, it's putting too much sugar into everyone. And that's why we've got diabetes. So can you see that this whole way of producing food is not sustainable, environmentally and health-wise? Okay, so that's why I said that's chemical. You can understand those are all chemicals they're using. We want to farm biologically. The more life there is in the soil, the more nutrition in the food, the better it is for us. Does that make sense? So in healthy soil, do you know you can take 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, and in there are all these microbes and small little life that lives in there. More in 1 teaspoon than all the humans on this planet. Really. That's living soil. And out of living soil comes nutrition, and that's how we should be growing food. Okay? So that is the basis. That's the That's what underlies everything I'm trying to do, is to educate people on that the current way of producing food is not good for us or the planet, and that we have to figure out new ways of producing food. Okay, so enough scary doom and gloom. There is a solution. Okay, regenerative agriculture, and I'll get into it now. Any questions? Why are you guys so quiet? Have I scared you now? Hey? There is an answer, so we don't have to be scared. Anyone? No questions? Everyone okay? Okay. If you think of anything, please ask. Okay, so let's go back a couple of pages to this page here. The one with the cows and the sheep and the chickens. Yeah, that's the one. Okay. See there, it's got the circle in the middle with the, that's the one, my friend. One more forward. Other way. There's it, that's it. Okay. Okay. So what we're trying to do here is, has anyone heard of the 80-20 rule? It's actually called Pareto's principle. And what it says is, it's this sort of law of nature that 80% of the work gets done by 20% of the people. Or 80% of the nutrition is grown by 20% of the plants. It seems to be this thing that rears its head everywhere. So what I argue is that if we can get 80% of the result we want, but with 20% of the effort, then that's a good thing. So I don't mind a little bit of like waste or whatever, as long as we're working very efficiently. So if we can do something with less work but achieve a good result, then that's good. Okay, so we want to let the animals do a lot of the work for us. Okay, so on the African savanna, what do you see? You see big herds of buffalo and antelope, hey? And how do they behave? They herd close together, right? And the reason they do that is that they don't want to be eaten by a lion. Humans may be a bit different. We'd probably throw our friend at the lion and run away. But all of these buffalo and antelope, they herd close together. That's why they're called herd animals. They feel safe when they're close together, okay? But because there's lions there, they keep moving, right? So what they're doing, there's places in Africa, East Africa, and even here in South Africa, 100 years ago, you would wait at a road crossing for 3 days while the springbok crossed. They would keep coming for 3 days. That's how many springbok we had in the Karoo. I promise you. Only 100 years ago. And what do you think all those animals were doing? They were moving so they could follow the fresh pasture and eat fresh grass and avoid predation, avoid being eaten by a lion. Now what they were doing to the land while they're doing that is that grass actually likes to be eaten and trampled because it stimulates it to grow again. If you leave grass, what it will do is it becomes what they call moribund. And what that means is that the grass grows too much and it starts to shade itself. And then it doesn't get sun and then it dies. So grass actually needs to be eaten. You don't want to pull its roots out, but what these animals do, like a cow, is it uses its tongue and it pulls out, or like a sheep, these springbok will just eat right down to that level. And when the rains come, it just regrows again. So because of the lions, it keeps moving. Where we have problem with livestock in rural areas where you see a lot of erosion, does everyone know what erosion is? It's where you don't have grass anymore. You just see dust. You can't grow anything in that land, eh? And everyone blames the animals. You've got too many sheep here, or you've got too many goats, or you've got too many cows. But the reality is, we just need to manage those animals better. We have to keep moving them. So once they've eaten here, then we need to move them and allow the grass to come back up. And we let that rest. And then later, when it's back up, we bring them back. And what those animals are doing, so they're providing two services. One, they're eating the grass and stimulating regrowth. But they're also providing free fertilizer. Hey? All of their manure is going onto that ground. That is, that stuff, I know we don't like to think about it, but that stuff is so valuable. It's providing so many nutrients to that grass to regrow. Okay, so we always want to be using animals. And then what happens when we on those plains? What do you see following those big herds of buffalo and and antelope, like the springbok and the impala. Birds, hey? So you see egrets and oxpeckers and other birds following, and what they're doing is they're eating all the fly larvae. So in manure, you're going to get flies laying eggs, right? Now, for the animals like the buffalo, that's going to become a health problem, but not because the birds are following. So the birds are eating all of that. Now, the birds are getting an amazing diet. You know how healthy a bird is that's eating bugs and flies and fly larvae? You must see a chicken, an egg from a chicken that's eating those things. It's amazing. Okay, so they're doing two things. They're also adding their manure. So now you've got birds also adding free fertilizer to the land. And they're also your pest control. So you asked about bugs and pests. Now the birds are doing that for us. But when we spray chemicals on the land, there's no birds. Birds are not going to come help you. They know, they're smart. They understand this is a poisoned land. They're not going to be there. So what we're doing here is we've started with chickens. But the ultimate goal is to have something like sheep or cows, ruminants. They know how to process grass. You or I eat grass, you're not going to get any nutrition. But a cow and a sheep has what they call multi-chambered stomachs. They've got like 3 or 4 stomachs, right? And they can process grass over and over until they get the nutrition out of it. And then they fertilize for free. So we want to run those on pasture, but control where they eat. So we do things like we use electric fencing. You've seen here with the chickens, they've got that electric fencing. So we can keep them where we want them. It's the same with the cows and the sheep. Okay? And then we move them slowly on pasture. We say, okay, they've eaten enough here. And then we set up a fence in a new space, and they eat there for 2-3 days. And then we watch the land, and then we move them again. And then behind them, we bring the chickens. So the same as the oxpecker and the egret, those birds following the buffalo, we're now doing the same thing. So what's happening is we're fixing the land. We're mimicking. You know what mimicking is? We're copying. We're copying how nature does it. And at the same time, we're producing produce. So for a mine, unfortunately, when we mine, it's a very, what they call extractive process. We're pulling stuff out of the ground, right? But we also have a responsibility as a mine to fix the land that we damage. And agriculture can be that tool, because now we're going to damage parts of this land, they're putting down fertilization, and we're accelerating that process of succession so that everything starts to grow better. So it's a tool. So the first thing we're doing here is we're helping the land. That's our responsibility as a mine. But then, look what we get. We get this unbelievable egg at the end of the day. So we're getting nutrition, but we start to think about things differently. First we're a soil farmer, then we rehabilitate a mine, and then we get the best food in the country. That's how we need to think about things. Okay. So we covered non-GMOs and the way that produces food. So just so you know, for these chickens, they are receiving a non-GMO feed. So the feed that Susan's giving them every day is non-GMO. So that comes from farmers not using pesticides or genetically modified corn. They're growing indigenous corn. And that is what's coming to these chickens. Plus, they're putting additional good things inside there. Things like bokashi and diatomaceous earth and moringa. These are some fancy people in Johannesburg eat that stuff, and we're giving it to the chickens. So these eggs, I will argue, might be some of the best eggs in the country. And you know, sure, now I get excited. You guys shouldn't get me started talking. Eh? I'm going to have a sip of water. Any questions before we do any more? Hey? So, in an egg bought from, now I'm not criticizing these guys next door. They're producing lots of eggs for lots of people to eat. But the reality is, one of those eggs, you have to eat 6 of those eggs for one of these eggs to get the same nutrition inside you. I promise you. When you guys take these, what I would suggest you do, because you guys are all getting these eggs, eh? Go just buy 6 eggs from the store, and then break them open in a bowl of water. One. The one from the store just goes like this into pieces. This one stays together. There's a massive difference in the quality of that egg. Do you know, and why I asked your ages earlier, so we're almost finished, we're coming full circle back to and why I asked the question of age. if you're 50, okay, we need a 70-year-old to go back to 1950, but it's not that long ago. You know, if you're 50, you were born only 20 years after 1950. In 1950, an apple that was produced anywhere in the world had more nutrition than the apples you buy from the store now, because we've taken so much quality and nutrients out of our soils. You know that you have to eat 26 apples today to get the same benefits as eating one apple in 1950. I promise you. And it's the same with almost all the food that we're getting now. So people are taking in calories. We're getting the volume, but we're not getting the nutrition. And that's why people are also not healthy. That's why we've got obesity and overweight and etc., etc. So we have problems, but we also have solutions. So what we're doing here is very much about taking the first step towards fixing the problem. And that's why this mine is so amazing, because we've got forward-thinking people that are thinking ahead. They're not just taking the short-term view, thinking long-term, and trying to fix what's a real issue for everyone on this planet. Okay, that's essentially everything I have to talk about. But there's a few more things in here. Like I said, you guys are welcome to take these. And yeah, you can refer back to these. I'm also available. I'm here at least once, twice a month. You're welcome to, at any point, come and speak to me if you've got any questions or have any interest on the farming side. All right. Cool. Anyone got questions?
Just want to know, how do you know your soil is good? How do you know it's good soil?
How do you know it's good? Well, generally, it's probably not that good. You're very lucky if you've got good soil. You know what I mean? Like, if you live in a tropical part of the country where the land has been left and it's in a natural state, you've probably got good soil. But it's all fixable. You know, compost is where we should start. So starting with good compost. And you know, the beautiful thing is that, you know, one man's rubbish is another man's gold. You know that saying? So most people are throwing away the ingredients for perfect compost. You know, the food waste or the kitchen waste in your kitchen. So all the peels from your oranges or anything that is left over from your meals. That is an ingredient for compost. Grass clippings. You know, these people that have got these beautiful gardens, they're taking all the leaves off their garden and taking it to the dump. You know, that goes into compost, makes what we call black gold. Hey, that's the soil in which. So we can make our own soil. You know, at the moment, I go to restaurants in Joburg and I collect all their waste, and they pay me. They pay me to 150 Rand every time I go and collect their waste. I would do it for free because I'm getting ingredients for my compost. So there's also ways we can think about using someone else's waste to produce food. So that's what they call circular economy. It's thinking not just here, it's thinking like, what is the big picture? What is the circle of stuff? The waste from this process becomes the input or the starting point for the next process. Most people are thinking in isolation. So I think we can fix that quite quickly. Good soil, I mean. Any other questions? You're welcome to fire questions anytime. So if you think of something later, just let me know. Okay, guys? How long have we been going? I think that's enough, eh?